currently taking place in Namibia. Peter?
Yes, indeed, Palesa. The 38th Ordinary Summit of the Heads of State and Government of Southern African Development Community, SADC, is currently underway in Namibia and Windhoek. The inter-governmental organizations, well, that goes back to the 1960s, its origins as a grouping that struggled to bring an end to colonial and white minority rule in Southern Africa. SADC was pretty much transformed in the early 1990s to emphasize both socio-economic cooperation and political security cooperation. Well, let's take a look and see now the relevance of this organization, this grouping in current times, its need for reinvention, reform perhaps. And to take us through that conversation, I'm now joined by Professor Anthoni Nieuwkerkfor. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, and good evening.
All right, so SADC has gone through some transformations, and when it first, its incarnation, SADC, it was very specific about what it needed to do. Then they thought, right, we need to kind of amp the game up a little bit in the 90s, let's make it more social, economic, and develop the region. But we're in 2018 now, and I just wonder, is it due another reset, another revamp?
SADC 2.0.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably needs that. You know, the fundamental change between the SADCC, when it was the fight against white minority rule, colonialism, and so on, and the new version, SADC, came when South Africa became democratic in 1994 and joined SADC as a fully fledged member. So when the hegemon joins the bloc, everything changed. And that is still the case. The challenge, I think, for SADC, there are many challenges. One of the biggest is, as small economies in the region, Lesotho, Swaziland, Seychelles, Mauritius, Zambia, how do you deal with this overpowering neighbor, which is South Africa, which really dominates in economic and political terms, and even safety and security terms? How to deal with South Africa as the new member has always been SADC's challenge. It now focuses very much on a socio-economic agenda, which I think is correct, and it tries to push democratic values by observing all these elections, assisting member states to maintain some kind of standard. But the truth is, a bloc or a club of 15 member states, they all pursue their own national interests. Sometimes when national interests overlap, say there's a common security threat, say Zimbabwe is in the point of collapse, or Lesotho, as it is, failing state, then there's a pull together to deal with the problem collectively, which is good. But as you point out, in 2018, in an era of globalization, the digital economy, the fourth industrial revolution, the declining importance of America, the troubles of the EU, and the rise of China, how does this bloc cohere, deals with these external challenges, and at the same time finds a way to integrate their economies? The game has changed, and I do think, if I may say, SADC has always been a state-driven project. So these summits, you see the pictures of these ruling elites. I mean, Kabila sits in the summit. Kabila is not a sign or a picture of democracy. So it's really problematic.
So what would a reset look like then?
Well, that's a challenging question. I think there is value in the 15 member states of SADC pulling together. There's strength in numbers. If you have to negotiate a trade agreement with, say, the EU, it makes sense to have the 15 member states working together. Infrastructure development and socio-economic development is key. But the reset must come where states are driving all of these projects. It needs to be people-driven. And most importantly, I would say, apart from civil society participating, the private sector needs to find its place in this regional integration project and not be subservient to state-driven initiatives.
Talking about the people, if you ask citizens across the continent, across the SADC region, they might be asking, okay, it's nice that they're meeting in Windhoek, but what's in it for me? How does it translate to the ordinary man on the street?
The man and the woman.
Yes.
Yeah, with difficulty, because SADC, because it's a state-driven project, and has always been the prerogative of heads of state and ruling elites, they play in that area. Difficult to translate into progress for women and children and people on the street. That's true. Half of SADC, the region, is poor, like in South Africa. There's pockets of growth and stability, but there's like the Seychelles or Mauritius or Botswana or Windhoek indeed. But there's also high levels of inequality and underdevelopment. Whatever SADC does, they need to show the people of the region that they are acting in their interest, which is the narrative that comes from when people speak, those summit declarations and so on. But it's couched in very high-level language, and I think we need to put that aside and say to SADC leaders, open up, democratize your processes, bring civil society and NGOs and people's organizations into the picture. And then again, if you talk about bringing trade relations, economic systems, fiscal policies together so that we can say to the Chinese, we negotiate with you as a bloc, then you have to say the private sector needs to lead these processes.
All right, so final question, and this is a difficult one for me to understand, is you've got SADC, then you've got COMESA, then you've got now this continent-wide free trade agreement.
Correct.
How does it all fit together then? I mean, should we dissolve them all and stick with the big one now, or what do we do?
They don't fit together. Yeah. I mean, this is the short answer. It's a complex situation. They don't fit together. One of the problems of Africa is to speak with one voice when you face these very powerful external actors on which we depend, the Europeans, the Chinese, the Asians, for imports and exports. We need to find a way to refine our very complex, spaghetti-like, overlapping membership of too many regional blocs and deal with it. I would say, because time is very short now, SADC needs to get its house in order and find the 15 member states, speak with one voice, find our niche. What is it that we in Southern Africa can trade best and say to our trading partners, this is what we offer. And I would caution our member states jumping into this continental free trade agreement too quickly, because there are so many preconditions to make, for example, the free flow of goods, services and people. Are we going to sign up to that particular clause? I mean, you can imagine if we open our borders visa-free, people run away from conflict. Understandably, they come to where the grass is greener. So South Africa is not quite ready, I think, in terms of its own internal systems and processes to deal with the consequences of free trade.
All right, Professor van Nieuwkerk, I'm going to have to bring you in again to have this conversation a bit longer, but we've run out of time. But thanks so much indeed for your insights today.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you. Right, that's a look at the current SADC conglomeration as it is, and perhaps needs a relook, but a conversation we'll certainly be having going forward. Palesa?